Well, House of the Dragon Season 2 is done, and considering that I've actually been quite a fan of the franchise that was created in Westeros with Game of Thrones back in 2011, I figured why not talk about this for a moment. So today I'm going to look at actually one of my favorite TV shows of all time, what happened to it in the later seasons, and actually how I personally think that Game of Thrones was very fundamental to Star Wars. I usually like to start these videos by telling you a little bit about myself, like how I got into the franchise back when I did, because with Game of Thrones, I kind of missed the initial start in 2011. I didn't actually start watching it until 2013, right before the third season was about to come out, because I had been hearing from people that it was a big show, and there was a lot of commotion, of course, online about it. So it was like, okay, let's check this out. And in one weekend, on Saturday, I binged all of season 1, and then on Sunday, all of season 2. And then on Monday, the new episode of season 3 would drop. And honestly, I was hooked the moment that I was watching those first 2 seasons. I was like, wow, this is so impressive. Honestly, I was so impressed by the fact that this was a TV show that we were seeing, because we had not seen anything like this in terms of TV shows ever. All due respect to, some of the big shows that were coming out at the time, like Breaking Bad and The Wire and whatnot, nothing had the production skill of Game of Thrones. And it was only after Game of Thrones that a lot of other TV shows realized, oh, we can actually do a lot with production in a TV show, and people will watch it, people will appreciate it, and will make a lot of money off of it. I was personally reminded of Lord of the Rings when I was watching this. A big difference, of course, is a lot more blood and tits and gore and everything, but still, the fantasy setting. And then later, I also found out that actually George R.R. Martin, the writer of the books, based his world in Westeros, that A Song of Ice and Fire is about. He based that off of Tolkien's work. He just wanted to make it a little bit more interesting, and that is where I very much agree with him, that it is more interesting that the characters in Game of Thrones and his books, Song of Ice and Fire and everything, are way more grayer. They're not just clear-cut good and bad like they are in Lord of the Rings. And I love Lord of the Rings, I really do. I have no issue with the fact that the characters are more clear-cut good and bad, but I really do think it is more nuanced and more interesting in Game of Thrones, that even though you have characters that you're supposed to root for, they do stupid things sometimes, and you see that throughout the show, that you understand why they make the decisions that they do, but it can cost them at times. And I thought, in addition to the production design, also the writing of Game of Thrones was excellent, at least for the first 4 seasons. Like the way that they were able to adapt it off the books, which, by the way, I have never read the books, and I don't plan to read the books until they're finally done. Yes, I'm a bit bitter about the fact that George R.R. Martin still has not released the next book in his series, even though it's been 15 years or so? It's been a very long time, and it just doesn't seem like he's going to release the new book anytime soon. So that sucks, and only if the series is finished, I will read it. But at least the series of Game of Thrones, the TV show, is finished, so at least I can judge all of that. But the first 4 seasons I thought were excellent. Then it started to drop slowly. Like season 5 is the last season that is still based on a book, but you can clearly see that the show writers already had to go make their own decisions to lead into season 6, which was the first season where they didn't have any books to adapt off, and they had to make their own decisions. And I was not really a fan of season 5 for the most part, despite the fact that actually Hardhome, episode 8 of season 5, is my favorite episode of the entire show. But I thought that certain storylines were kind of boring, kind of slow. The storyline of Bran and the Three-Eyed Raven wasn't even in there because they were so far ahead. They were like, oh, well, I suppose we'll just have to cut that out completely and introduce it in season 6. Now, I do think season 6 overall is a pretty good season. That is mostly, though, because of episode 5, The Door, and episodes 9 and 10, Battle of the Bastards and Winds of Winter. I do think that those 3 episodes are 3 of the best episodes in the entire show. They're so damn good. It really shows that they got people in to help make those episodes, to really make it grand, awesome skill, even though it's still a TV show. Like, honestly, I think that Battle of the Bastards and Winds of Winter could be shown in a theater, and you would be having a blast. All Game of Thrones fans there watching for 2 hours, two of the best episodes of the entire show. Like, yes, please, I would love that. So, hint, hint, theaters, please do something with that. But I was very hooked into the show until season 8. Season 8 completely lost me. And to indicate how hooked I was, I would essentially watch all of the new season. After the season then was out, watch all of the seasons up until that point, and then before the next season would then come out, watch everything again as a reminder, and then start with the new season. Every single year, I would just be so into the world of Game of Thrones. I love the show. And look, might be people screaming at me right now, then why didn't you read the books? Again, they never finished. And until they're finished, I don't really feel like doing that, because I've heard from people that they are itching for a new book, because the last book ended with so many open ends and open storylines that were like, where the hell is this going? We have no idea. And we probably won't have an idea for a very long time. And it's likely, actually, that George R.R. Martin is going to die before he releases the next book. So anyway, I said my piece about that. On the other hand, though, the way that the show ended it was also not great, because we had a very disappointing ending. I think everyone agrees with that. Season 8 was terrible. Not all of Season 8, actually. I do think that the first 2 episodes were okay, because the first 2 were just setup episodes. Like, okay, let's just set up the battle that is to come. But especially The Long Night. I remember the first time that I watched The Long Night, and the first thing that I did the moment that the episode started is I run to the curtains, I close my curtains, I turn off all the lights, I up the brightness on my TV, and still it was difficult to see what the hell was happening. It was so incredibly dark that I was just like, what the hell are they trying to do here? I understand that, the White Walkers make it look very dark, but if you compare that episode to something like the Battle of Helm's Deep in Lord of the Rings: The Two Towers, the Battle of Helm's Deep is in the rain, in the dark, and we can see everything perfectly fine. That's how you do a dark sequence. Not what the hell they did with The Long Night. And, I mean, do I even need to say anything about the last 2 episodes, especially the last episode? God. They really fucked it at the end. And I was very disappointed by that, because for years and years and years, I was involved in this world. I was so hooked in, as I said. Like, I would rewatch the show before the new season comes out, and then after the season, watch it again with the new season with it, just to pick up on everything, because Game of Thrones is so dense. There are so many things that you pick up on the second or third or fourth or fifth viewing. Like, you can rewatch it over and over, and you will learn more things the more you watch it, which I think is great about the show. At least with the first 6 seasons or so, I really had that feeling. But especially when you then get towards the end, you notice the drop in quality. You notice that certain storylines never come back again. Like, remember that at one point, Daenerys in Meereen was met with another Red Priestess from Asshai? Where the fuck did she go? She was in like one scene, and then we never saw her again after that. And okay, that's that, I suppose. Or the fact that Daenerys just left Daario Naharis behind in Meereen, and that was that. There are just a couple of storylines where I'm just like, what the hell were they even thinking? They weren't. Seems pretty clear. But anyway, after season 8 was done, it came to the point where, they're going actually the Star Wars route, because we had the original trilogy, and then we're going to do a prequel. So, yeah, with House of the Dragon, we have 2 seasons now, which I enjoyed. I thought were good. I personally don't agree with the people who say it's the best damn thing in television right now, because in all honesty, I did not really feel as much while watching House of the Dragon season 1 as I was Andor season 1. I think Andor was way better. All due respect to, House of the Dragon. It's a good show. Just not as good as Andor, I feel. I might be biased, though. But anyway, now to tie it back to Star Wars, like, why is Game of Thrones influential to Star Wars? Because actually, Star Wars was the influential movie back in 1977. When it came out, it spawned so many other sci-fi movies in the years after that. Like, We had Superman. We had the first Star Trek movie, even though it's shit. We did have it. We had Alien, very original concept. And actually, like, I recently heard that Ridley Scott was writing something, and then he saw Star Wars, and he was so depressed by it that he stopped writing whatever he was writing, and he made Alien instead. So that just indicates how influential Star Wars was way back then. So the reason that a show like Game of Thrones gets made in the first place is probably because Star Wars was successful back then. But I do think what it did in terms of television specifically is something very revolutionary and very much like nothing we had seen before. Because what was Star Wars doing at the time that Game of Thrones came out, early 2011? They were in, I think, season 4 or 5 of the Clone Wars. And I mean, the Clone Wars was cool, nothing wrong with it, but like it's nothing compared to what Game of Thrones was doing. And Game of Thrones showing that we could make high budget, big production TV shows, not having to show it on the big screen because it's a movie. No. TV shows that you can just put on your TV. That was very revolutionary. And because Game of Thrones did that so well, and then also a couple of other shows, finally, Star Wars decided to do a lot of TV shows, and in the past 5 years, we have gotten more Star Wars TV shows than ever. It started, of course, with The Mandalorian, and then we had Andor as well, Ahsoka, Obi-Wan, Book of Boba Fett. We had all those shows in the past couple of years, and I think it's great that we have that, and I sincerely want to thank everyone who made Game of Thrones for making this possible. That I now, as a Star Wars fan, have amazing, great, big production shows that I can watch on TV. So, yeah, that's one thing that I definitely wanted to say in this video. And also, besides the fact that, of course, Game of Thrones was very influential in terms of the production and that Star Wars is now making TV shows like that, we also have a lot of cast members cross over. And it's mostly cast members who appeared in Game of Thrones first, and then Star Wars was like, ooh, I like them. I want to have them in my project. So let's take a look at some of these actors who we've had. First of all, I think the most obvious one is Emilia Clarke, who plays Daenerys Targaryen, which is my favorite character in Game of Thrones. And while she was still doing the show, she then appeared in Solo: A Star Wars Story as Qi'ra. Now, I personally didn't really like Solo: A Star Wars Story, and I was actually kind of disappointed with her in the movie. Kind of the same how I was disappointed with how her character ended in Game of Thrones. No spoilers. I will say, though, the way that Qi'ra's story ends in Solo with her talking to Maul and setting off somewhere, I'm like, I would like to see what happened after that, because I still would like to see what happened to Maul between the events of Solo and a couple of years later when he appears in Rebels Season 2. What happened with Maul and what happened with Qi'ra? I think there's a story to tell. Would like to see that. Another actor is Ian McElhenney. I hope I pronounced that right. He plays Barristan Selmy, Sir Barristan Selmy in Game of Thrones. Very loyal to Daenerys when he gets dumped by Joffrey. He actually plays General Dodonna in Rogue One. I was a little bit surprised that he was picked for that role, but that was nice to see. Another actress is named Kate Dickie. She plays Lysa Arryn in Game of Thrones. I think most people who've seen the show know who she is. She appears very briefly in The Last Jedi as a First Order officer, but she has like one speaking line, and because of her accent, it really stands out. Oh yeah, that's her. And someone else who appears very briefly in The Last Jedi is Ralph Ineson. He's the one who actually knocks Theon Greyjoy down at the end of season 2 when they captured Winterfell. He's like very done with him. He's like, let's go home. And Ralph Ineson is the definition of a guy who plays a bad guy in everything, in so many things. Like he has appeared in so many things that I've seen, and most of the time he's a bit of a bad guy. Which is interesting because he has the face for it, let's be fair. But yeah, that was interesting to see that he again plays a bad guy in The Last Jedi because he's a First Order officer. And another actor who also appears very briefly in Star Wars is Thomas Sangster Brody. He plays Jojen Reed in Game of Thrones. If you can spot him in The Force Awakens, it's impressive. He has one speaking line, and you don't really recognize him.
We have an unsanctioned departure from Bay 2.
The first couple of times that I watched The Force Awakens, I actually didn't notice that it was him, but he's in there. Another actress who crossed over is Natalie Tina, who I personally know best as Tonks in the Harry Potter series. But in Game of Thrones, she plays a character named Osha. I really hope I am triggering some Acolyte haters right now. But anyway, she appears in an episode of The Mandalorian, episode 6 of season 1, as a Twi'lek named Xi'an. And I really hope that I can trigger a little bit more the Acolyte haters right now with Dean Charles Chapman, who actually first appears in Game of Thrones as someone else that he ends up as, because he is, of course, Tommen Baratheon. But initially he appears as a Lannister who gets killed off. But then he was actually recast as Tommen Baratheon. And yeah, he was Torben in The Acolyte. Now that I think about it, actually both characters committed suicide, Tommen and Torben. And they also sound alike. Interesting. Anyway, another very famous one, and one that I was really looking forward to when they announced her in The Force Awakens, was Gwendoline Christie as Brienne of Tarth. Because Brienne of Tarth is honestly one of my favorite Game of Thrones characters. She's awesome. And I was thinking, oh my god, if we have her in Star Wars as a badass, chrome-looking stormtrooper, because they promoted the shit out of Phasma. And I was like, oh my god, that looks amazing. I cannot wait for it. I would love to see it. And then she has 2 minutes of screen time and dies. And the thing is, then they bring her back for The Last Jedi, and she has 2 minutes of screen time and she dies. Actually, that's no joke, by the way. I figured out Phasma's screen time for both movies, and it is about 2 minutes for both movies. In two movies that are like between 2 and 2.5 hours long, so let's say a total runtime of 4.5 hours, she has 4 minutes of screen time. I was very disappointed by that. I love The Last Jedi, I love The Force Awakens, but goddamn, they fucked up with Gwendoline Christie, in my opinion. Another actor that I firstly know from Game of Thrones is named Anton Lesser, and he played Qyburn, actually a very important role throughout the series. The moment that I saw him in the Andor trailer, I'm like, this fits perfectly. Because the way that Qyburn acts in Game of Thrones is very much like an Imperial officer. And I saw him, and he was an Imperial ISB officer, and I'm like, yeah, no, that makes sense. That is supposed to be. And I was very happy to see that when I actually watched Andor and saw his performance, I'm like, yeah, no, I fully believe this. There are actually more actors from Game of Thrones in Andor. Another actor is named Rupert Van Sittert, I think his name is. He plays Lord Royce in Game of Thrones. And in Andor, he appears as Chief Hine. Briefly, though. And he doesn't do too well in Andor. He's a much better character in Game of Thrones, if I'm honest. And then an actress who actually transitioned over from Game of Thrones to Andor is Faye Marseille. She plays the Waif in Game of Thrones, the one who tortures Arya towards the end of season 6. And then she played Vel in Andor. I definitely like her more as Vel. Way nicer character. Another actress is Indira Varma. I hope I pronounced that correctly. She plays Ellaria Sand in Game of Thrones. And she's Tala in the Obi-Wan show. But I think we all know her fictional partner a little bit better, Pedro Pascal, because we know Pedro Pascal is the Mandalorian. I'm still a little bit pissed by the fact that he is only the voice, really. He doesn't really play the guy in the suit, but whatever. But the moment that he was introduced in season 4 of Game of Thrones, I'm like, I fucking love this guy. He is amazing. He is so cool in that season. And I was just like, I want to see more of this. I want to see more of this. And then he dies. It's okay. I did not expect him to die that quickly. It was a great death, though, at the hands of the Mountain, quite literally. Oh, my God. I still love that episode, The Viper and the Mountain. It's a great episode, but, it is heartbreaking. But I was very happy to see that he was actually coming back to play the main character in The Mandalorian, and he's still playing him. And I'm actually curious to see how that'll work in the new movie coming out next year or so. Then another actor is Richard E. Grant. He first appeared in Game of Thrones as the person who plays Tywin Lannister in the stage play that Arya watches in season 6. Then he was in The Rise of Skywalker as a high-ranking first officer. What is his character name? You know what the thing is? I've seen The Rise of Skywalker several times, and I just don't care. I really don't care. I cannot remember his character name. So I'm sorry. Someone will probably say it in the comments or something. But anyway, those are the actors who first appeared in Game of Thrones and then went over to Star Wars. And I do think those were quite a lot of important people who actually transitioned over to Star Wars. And it's cool to see a lot of them transition over because I really like them in Game of Thrones. And it's, well, for some, it's nice to see them back in Star Wars. Not all of them, Phasma. Anyway, now for the actors who actually appeared in Star Wars first and then came into Game of Thrones. I think probably the most obvious one is Julian Glover, General Veers in The Empire Strikes Back, and he then plays Grand Maester Pycelle, the biggest fucking piece of shit that I wanted to see die so badly for so long, and it finally happened in season 6, episode 10. But God, that took a while. That took a very long while. Pycelle is despicable. And honestly, credit to Julian Glover. He did a great job performing him, but God damn it. But yeah, he's also Walter Donovan in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, and indicates this is another guy who likes to play bad guys in a lot of stuff. Then another actor who appears very briefly in Game of Thrones is Oliver Ford Davies. He was in The Phantom Menace as the character Seo Bibble. And then he appears in, I think, the first episode of season 2 of Game of Thrones, and he gets killed by Melisandre quite quickly. And then an actor who has appeared in a lot of things, and he's quite old, but interestingly enough, he's not in the original trilogy. He only appears in The Force Awakens first, is Max von Sydow, who plays Lor San Tekka in the opening scene of The Force Awakens. And when I saw that scene, I was like, wait, was he in the original trilogy? I don't remember him. No, he is not, but it's honestly a bit weird because he has the age. Like, he was in the old Dune movies, which came out around the time of Return of the Jedi and everything, so he could have fit. But yeah, it was a bit surprising. And, well, of course, he is the Three-Eyed Raven in season 6 of Game of Thrones. Not in season 4, when we see the Three-Eyed Raven for the first time, because Bran then finds the tree where the Three-Eyed Raven is, and that's all there is to it. And that's a different actor. And I think I have gone through all of them now. So did I miss any? Let me know in the comments if I missed any of the actors. But I'm sure I had most of them at least. I don't really want to go into all the extras who we don't really recognize. I'm more so talking about people that you can clearly recognize their face off. So that's pretty much all there is to that. But yeah, my conclusion is I think Game of Thrones has been extremely important to Star Wars. I would love to see it continue that way because I do think House of the Dragon is a good show, and I would love to see more from the world of Westeros. I think it's very interesting world building that George R.R. Martin did with his books in the first place. Even though I haven't read them, it is a great, interesting, fascinating fantasy world that I'm very captivated by, and I would love to see more of it. I would also love to see the books finished so I can finally read them. But that's pretty much all I have to say. What are your thoughts? Do you like Game of Thrones? Have you seen it? What are your thoughts of the show? And have you seen House of the Dragon? And what about my statement? Like, do you think that Game of Thrones is indeed very fundamental to Star Wars, or do you have a different take on it? Please let me know any and all of your thoughts and opinions in the comments below. Please subscribe to my channel where I talk about Star Wars most of the time. Sometimes I'll do these little side steps where I talk about franchise that I feel is related in some way to Star Wars, but I usually try to bring it back to Star Wars because I'm the Dutch Star Wars guy. That's my channel, talk about Star Wars, and actually Star Wars Outlaws, the new game, is coming out, and I'm thinking about streaming that, so maybe if you're interested in seeing that, stay tuned, subscribe. Also make sure to follow me on social media to stay updated with everything that I do, and until my next video, may the Force be with you.